Hey, what's going on? It's the ManFUzed Podcast. I am Kay Lee, your host, audio producer, voice artist. My co-host, Ben H., real estate broker. So today we continue our conversation with Jason.lyle. Jason is one of the founders of AIR, Adventures in Recovery, where he helps and takes people out who have experienced extreme trauma, maybe suffering from addiction, and brings them out into nature using cold water therapy, meditation, and much more. So today he's going to outline what cold water therapy actually does for our bodies. What's the benefit of cold water therapy? What could it do for you? Hang out, we're going to tell you. I would think some people's first instinct would be to get the fuck as far away from maybe the type of church you were in, or they're selling hell more than they are heaven. Mm-hmm. Anything you do outside of what they, deem as the way God wants you to be, you're going to have guilt about it. Mm-hmm.
Which is a tool that's used by the church to keep you loyal.
Well, and it's funny
guilt
too,
and
because
shame and...
Well, you're selling salvation, so you're selling
and it's
the answer.
also, and I'm not sure if I have what kind of church, but some of the most evil motherfuckers out there, hundreds of years ago or whatever, killing, mass murdering. I mean, how many people have died in the name of God? Doing God's work.
Most everybody, most every war, even current day, has a religious basis to it. When I was in Iraq for a couple years and got to talk to a lot of people there as an interrogator, and people would say, this is not a religious war. I say, it is a religious war, because they think it is. So whether you think it's a religious war or not, if the people that you're fighting think it's a religious war, then it is. Mm-hmm. Because they are living and dying, and so are you, living and dying from their perspective upon
the belief system.
Inshallah, which means God's will. And so every conflict, everything, when you look back at the history of how the Vatican was created and how the Vatican Bank was created, a lot of things happened in the 1500s, man, that really changed the course of religion, changed the course of history, and changed the course of our idea about God. And, we talk about it a lot with Matt, how the world changed from a 432 hertz to 430 hertz frequency.
We were talking about old ancient structures, and because we were very fascinated by ancient aliens and a lot of that stuff. And
when we look at ancient structures, like ancient churches, for example, that were built prior to the 1500s, most of them are in Europe, but we even see some in America, which is hard to explain because in 1492, apparently Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But we can find structures in our current day cities that seem to predate that and seem to be designed and built potentially by the same architect and with similar materials as a lot of the structures that we find in Europe. But nonetheless, the windows on these cathedrals, and they have these elaborate windows, which if you put a sound wave and water under a microscope and you play the frequency of the organ that's inside the church, you can see that the sound frequency creates a pattern in the water which matches the
that's pretty cool.
window on the church. I'll show you some of that when we get off. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And a gentleman we had on a week or two ago knew a lot about it because he does a lot of research into that kind of thing, and so do I. But a lot changed in the 1500s, and this had a lot to do with the Roman Empire. And how they changed things and how they removed many books, including the Book of Enoch, which is a very important book from the Bible. And that's where we get the New Testament from. Or not the New Testament, but the King James Version, right? Anyway, So
the church, tries to keep you in this one line.
Well, look at the witch trials.
Sure.
Who the hell burns a beautiful woman alive? What kind of thing is that to even watch? We come from a brutal, brutal world.
Yeah.
And religion a lot of it has been done in the name of religion.
Exactly. Yeah. In the name of God or in the name of religion.
Our money has it. Everything is painted with a brush of religion.
It really is.
Like the brush of religion. And so you growing up in that, I didn't. Ben, I know you said you went to the church and you used to go. Being in that line and then going into that business.
Well, I'll give you you a little bit of an answer to your question. If you think about it long enough, I knew something was missing in me. I'm pretty open about that, or I felt like something was missing in me. But somehow, from a very early age, I knew that spirituality was real. Right. I read the Bible through for the first time when I was 8 years old.
Wow.
So and when I sat in church when I was a child, I listened, I paid attention. I served the church. I mean, I sang in choir, I went to youth group. I did everything. Boy Scouts, RAs, the whole thing. Something in me knew that the spiritual path was the right path, and I still believe that to this day. But going to seminary, to be fair, and I don't know that at the time I would have said, oh, this is why I'm going. I thought, okay, well, surely these guys have the answers. And there's all kind of stories I could tell you about, how divine inspiration came into my life. I mean, just crazy phone calls I would get out of nowhere that I shouldn't have gotten. Just things that I know for a fact this is what I'm supposed to be doing in my life, right? I go to seminary thinking, okay, well, here's going to be some answers. And so I remember going, I'm like, hey, look, I'm cool with your view on the Bible. I'm cool with your view on the church. I'm cool with all that. Just explain to me why. Just let's talk this out. Give me some intellectual information, right? I need to know this. And I remember I was about 2 semesters in, and I was sitting in hermeneutics class, and hermeneutics is the study of the Bible. And the professor says, if the Apostle Paul were alive, he couldn't pass my class. And I remember when I was walking out the door, I thought, son of a bitch, they don't know either. Like, they don't know. And then I realized something else, brother. 126 hours is how many hours my degree was.
Right.
And 1 hour was personal spiritual disciplines. 1. Wow. So I knew without a shadow, I'm like, man, this can't be right either. And so in this process, I start traveling to Uganda and seeing the rest of the world. I went to India, I went to Germany, I went to Greece. I mean, I spent time on Mount Athos with the monks in Greece. I mean, I've done all kind of things, right? So I knew the essence of spirituality was real.
Right.
I just knew that my medium for looking at that was not. And so I'm trying to dismantle that. And even in church, you can go back. I mean, my sermons are still online. I can go back from 2014, 15 and talking about, the kingdom of God is here right now, not some far off other place. And you can create heaven or hell for yourself here right now. So that's very controversial in the evangelical world to even say those things, right? So I was already on a path of saying, hey, and that's we had church in a barn. It's like, I don't want to be religious. I don't want to be religious. I want to be real. That's what I want to be, and I want to be alive. And I knew that involves spirituality, and we can get to this, later, but that's where yoga came in. That's where nature came in. I've always I remember being 5 years old and laying out in the woods for hours by myself. I've loved the woods and always have. It's always been a part of my life.
Yeah, Ben's a big outdoors, and we've had many conversations about, raising our kids and the importance of being in the outdoors, and being outside and not, behind your phone or, and being unplugged. And
because if you read what I read, here's the thing. We are not going outdoors. We are outdoors.
Right.
We are made up of the same shit that it's made out. We are not made out of sheetrock and wood. We're not made out of this stuff. We are made out of the same thing that nature's made out of. So when we enter nature, we're not going into some foreign something. We're actually going into what we're made to be in.
We're going home.
Going home. I take a group of guys elk hunting every year in September. We go to Colorado, hiking to the back country. Cool. We're looking at 13,000 foot peaks all over. Come on.
Can I go this year?
I
really want to go
Not to get you off course, but Jason, tell Ben, because you and I have been in communication. You've been gone for the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, I just got home.
Explain to Ben what you've been doing, because it's pretty epic.
Yeah, we left Atlanta, went to Bentonville, Arkansas, mountain bike for 2 days, went from Bentonville to Durango, Colorado, mountain bike for 2 days, went from Bentonville to Zion National Forest and climbed for 2 days, and then we ended up in Yosemite National Park, and we climbed in Yosemite.
Where was I? I should be there. These are the kind of things that I want to do.
He was sending me, and I told him, but when we spoke on the phone, and we were like, all right, you're going to be back at this point, I said, feel free to send me photos as you progress. And he did. He sent me these gangster, just beautiful photos of the shit he was doing. I was like, fuck. I was like, beautiful.
I mean, that's incredible.
I'm here in Atlanta.
No, it's really incredible too. I mean, because as we look more into, let's say, the Earth, right, and space and the atmosphere and these kinds of things, we realize how it was made specifically for us. And it's of supreme design. And for me personally, I can say that about 5 years ago, I was having a very difficult time. And I still have a tough time, but I mean, it was really brutal. And so I sought out someone who, was doing like spiritual ceremonies and things of this nature, not religious, but spiritual. Yeah. And it was out in the middle of the woods, in the jungle, and I went down there for a week, and it just changed my whole perspective on everything. It completely opened my mind. And as Chris alluded to, I've always been into getting out into nature. I agree with everything that you said. And I think that there's a big difference between religion and spirituality. And I noticed that you keep saying spiritually and spirituality and things like that over religion, because you can have religion, but all this killing and all this war and all this everything, it's all done in the name of religion. So then what is religion? Because certainly it wasn't what the God that I pray to intended.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
I feel like religion is spirituality with money attached to it.
It's man's incarnation.
Right.
I just told someone yesterday, as soon as you monetize spiritual, that's the reason why Adventures in Recovery, nobody's ever paid for a trip. That we're all donation based. If people want to give, they can give, and we fulfill our budget every year. But not a single guy that goes on these trips pay, because when you monetize somebody's spiritual life, you remove the essence of what the spiritual life is supposed to be. Even in Christianity, we follow a man that they call Jesus. Jesus goes into the temple and cleans the temple out because they're making money off of spirituality. And so your point is, if religion is what it is a group of people who come together to live life together. And that's a beautiful thing. That community is a beautiful thing. I believe in the Christian community. I can't think of a single catastrophe that happened in my life that the church was not present and loved on me and my family. The church has been present for every bad thing that's happened in my life. But the second that you say, hey, and by the way, if you really love the Lord, you tithe.
Right.
If you really love the Lord, you serve the church. If you really love the Lord, that's where it gets, you have this man who gets a paycheck based off of everybody else's desire to attach to God. And that's just bullshit.
It's a business.
Yeah. So call it, that's one thing I love about a couple, I won't call the names, but bigger churches around this area, they're very upfront by saying, hey, we're a business.
Right.
That's what we're doing.
If you're talking about Andy Stanley, I love him.
Yeah, man. And he's very honest about it.
Yeah. And I feel like when he does ask for, like, what do you say?
Offering, tithing, giving.
Yeah. But he just straight asked, hey, if you can make a donation, great. This is what we're trying to do.
We're trying to raise $7 million.
So we could buy...
I mean, he does that.
No, he did.
He does. He's like, we need $7 million.
And then when they needed more, he was like, the ground in Buckhead is very costly.
Right.
And it is.
It was $30 million. You remember that pitch? Were we in there together?
Yes, we were.
Yeah, we were there together, and Andy Stanley rolled out.
I was like hitting my pockets.
How
like,
they needed $32 million or something like that for the Buckhead Church. Well, they raised it.
But I think what they do for the area, and I grew up in like it was a Jewish, but not really Jewish. We were kind of practiced the Christmas and all that stuff. But I love Andy Stanley's church. I love his messages. I love him as a communicator, and I love how non-judgmental I don't know if they've always been this way, and if his dad was kind of like this, but it's just like everybody's welcome. If you don't want to turn your life over to Jesus Christ, at least sit for the message and hopefully be a better person is what I get out of it.
Yeah. Can I shift gears just a second?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, because I know I might have a timeline or whatever.
No,
but
whatever.
When I was working in wilderness therapy, and in wilderness therapy as a field guide, I would spend 8 days in the woods with a group of kids, and then I would be 6 days at home, then 8 days in the woods and 6 days at home. So I was living out in the woods with these kids, and these kids were, they were rough. They were on a rough go of it. They're, 15, 16 years old, and I just recognized over half of them were represented by the adoption community.
Interesting.
And I'm like, that is very interesting, right?
What do you mean by that?
They have been adopted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Over
So,
half
gotcha.
of them. Probably better than half. And most of them internationally, right? Some Russians and some maybe Costa Rica. I don't want to quote the countries, but South America. And so one night we come in and my life was just a wreck, man. I mean, just a wreck. I was no longer at the church, obviously. And, from all my troubles with that. And this named Rob Gent comes walking in. And if you listen to my podcast, you may have heard this story. And he starts talking about attachment trauma and pre-verbal trauma. And I'm sitting there listening to this guy. I'm like, man, this guy's reading my mail. And so he goes, he says, are any of you guys adopted? And I raised my hand, and he said, I want to ask you something. He said, if I told you I love you, I care for you, and I want what's best for you, what's the first word that comes to your mind? And I said, bullshit. And he said, exactly. He said, and then he explained to me, he said, that is because when you experience any sort of rejection, your prefrontal cortex disconnects from your lower brain. And he said, you can't be rational. Because he's explaining to us why the kids in the field are irrational. He said, when you have pre-verbal trauma, anything around rejection, your rational brain can compute it. it just goes offline because, to your point, when we're that little, all we have is an amygdala and a brainstem. That's all we have. Right. We have fight, flight, freeze.
That's it.
That's all we have. We don't have rational brain at all.
Right.
So that's where the trauma sticks. So I call this guy. I'm like, man, like you read my mail. I shared my whole life with him. And he goes, oh, first of all, you need to know. He said, you're not a bad person, man. You're a great person. I mean, I told him everything, right? The good, bad, ugly, and it was ugly.
Yeah.
And he said, let me give you some tools. And he said, I want you to get in ice cold water. And he said,
like, what the fuck?
He said, have you ever heard of Wim Hof? I'm like, yeah. He said, I want you to get in ice cold water. He said, I want you to do some holotropic breathing. He said, follow Wim Hof. He said, I want you to do some meditation. And he said, I want you to do some yoga. And he explained to me about regulating my central nervous system. It was October 19th of 2021. I took my first ice bath, and it was not immediate, but it was almost immediate, to where the transformation, my wife could come on here and even tell you, just that spiritual life that I had looked for my entire life. I think it was Rumi who said, I searched for God in the synagogues and churches and found God in the ultimate place, and that's me. And he also said, I searched for myself and found only God, and I searched for God and found only myself, right? So it's like this inner thing that I found, and that's where Adventures in Recovery birthed out of. So I went and did my 200-hour yoga cert and did my Wim Hof certification. And so, yeah, there's an ice bath sitting on my back porch. I was in it this morning.
That's awesome, man.
And we both did a program called 75 Hard.
Yeah.
And then phase 2 of that program, after you complete it, whenever you decide to do it, was you needed to, cold water therapy was part of the deal on a daily basis. I would imagine, if hearing your story and hearing you say that if you had a problem with substance abuse and addiction, whether it be alcohol or drugs or whatever, that cold water could almost probably be the relief and the addiction. Like, your day probably isn't as good if you don't dip in that.
Yeah, here's kind of what happens, right? So you were talking a minute ago about going to the jungle, right? And the spiritual ceremonies there. What those spiritual ceremonies do is give you access to part of your brain you don't normally have access.
Yes.
That's called your pineal gland, right?
Yes,
it's the very tiny gland that's at the very end of your brain stem. Yes. And if you've ever watched any YouTube stuff, it's called the spirit molecule. You can find that. Dimethyltryptamine, that's right. And it's produced in that area of your brain. So here's the thing.
Fires when we're born and when we die.
That's right. So when you're born and you have preverbal trauma, it's stuck in that pineal gland, and it's stuck in the limbic system. And so the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, think of them as the gas and the brake, fight or flight, freeze and fall, right? There's up and down, up and down. And so when you go to these ceremonies that you're talking about, you access into that very spirit center of who you are as a human.
Yes.
And cold water over and over and over. So when I go into cold water, my rational brain goes offline, my irrational brain comes online, and all it says is, get out of here. What are you doing? But under my own fruition, I go, no. I'm going to sit here.
That's right.
I'm going to stay here with this. And I close that prefrontal cortex back down over and over and over and over. It's just like going to the gym. It's just like going running. You're just training it. And
now you're winning a negotiation.
Now you're not even in negotiation anymore because the lower brain doesn't need to negotiate. Yeah. That's why it works for PTSD as well. I'm assuming that's, you talked about being Iraq interrogation, so I'm assuming that's part of what that is. That's why it works. All that trauma sticks in your autonomic nervous system. So when people will say, God, I act this way and I don't know why. So it's because it's stuck in your autonomic nervous system. It happens automatically.
It takes a long time too, man. And I mean, it's not something that just, well, for me anyways, that, it's just solved. No. It's like, now I have tools that I can use, but it's up to me to use the tools.
That's right.
And you get stuck back in that vicious cycle where, for me, I haven't gotten in cold water in probably 2 weeks now. And you're reminding me right now that I haven't.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why have I not gotten in? How has it been 2-3 weeks that I haven't even gotten in cold water?
Yeah.
But you don't realize it. And then you get back into those nasty cycles, and those areas of your mind open back up, and its consistency is so important.
Well, it's usually when you have addictive behavior, right? You're taking an internal problem and you want to bring an external solution. Right. So that could be your cell phone, that could be methamphetamine, that could be heroin, that could be alcohol, that could be food, that could be a person, that could be sex, that could be whatever the 9 million things different are. The root is the same. I'm trying to take something external and fix an internal problem. But this is where spirituality comes in. It's not an external solution. It is an internal solution. And that internal solution, this drives people nuts when I say this, that I work with, is choice. You just said it. Choice. I have to choose to get my ass up at 5:30 a.m., go to my mat. I do poses for 20 minutes. I meditate for 20 minutes. I breathe. I do 3 rounds of breathing. I go straight upstairs into the ice bath. I flop over in that thing. Doesn't matter if I've had to chip ice off the top of it before to get in. I get in. I was in Yosemite. I got in the river. My buddy Drew has a picture. There's snow melt 100 yards away.
And they're like, you're crazy. It's like, no.
No, I'm not. I'm far
not.
From crazy.
Yeah.
You fuckers are crazy
You're
for
crazy.
sitting up there on the bank,
Exactly.
right? I'm down here where you're getting sane,
That's right.
And that moment of choice creates the ability to go, and now when that shit fires off inside of me, for you, PTSD, for me, pre-verbal trauma, for other people, it could be molestation, it could be 9 million things. You're able to go, oh, wait a minute, I can catch that, capture it, and bring it back down. There's a beautiful verse that Jesus, I think it's Jesus, says this. No, it's not Jesus, it's Paul. Says, take every thought captive and make it obedient. Then Paul also says, the church looks over this. It's crazy. Paul also says, don't be conformed any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by renewing of your mind.
Yes.
Nicodemus comes to Jesus in the middle of the night and starts asking him questions, and Jesus goes, listen, quit asking me all that. If you really want to see the kingdom of God, you got to be born again. Well, the church turned that into something you can sell.
That's right.
But if you want to get saved, come to church. Jesus does not mean anything like that. And anybody wants to debate that, I'll debate it. He means you need to walk into every moment of your life as if you've never seen it before.
Yes.
And the only way you can do that is through meditation, through nervous system work. And Jesus taught that. Very clearly taught that.
It's so interesting.
Plant medicine, too. I mean, mushrooms are very effective. Like
Very
psilocybin is very effective at that fresh look. Whether it's a micro or macro dose, it can provide that space.
Lights
as
up
well.
the pineal gland. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And it's an amazing experience to see your life through fresh eyes, because all of a sudden you realize how beautiful you are,
Removes
and
the
how
ego.
beautiful your family is, and how beautiful and divine everything currently is. And it's almost like a song, where your life is almost like this beautiful song or this beautiful tapestry, and you're literally in the middle of the song. And it's just like, oh my gosh, wow. And so then all of a sudden it creates this level of gratitude and appreciation. And I remember those moments. I remember all those moments. They're recorded, and I go back to those places whenever I need to, but it's also fleeting because we deal with the stimulus on a consistent basis, and we don't know what to believe. You know, is it the church? Is it the Bible? Is it Jesus? Was Jesus even a real person? I mean, all these things which, oh, you can't say that. Okay, well, it's just a question. You know what I mean? Like, we don't really know.
Right.
I mean, you don't know anything that you haven't seen, right? So we have written history. That's why I love architecture so much, because architecture tells a story that written history does not tell.
Right.
And it's real. And it was built. And it's still there. And we can look at it and go, what is that?
Yeah. What were they thinking when they built that?
When I read history about when that thing was built, it doesn't say anything about the level of sophistication that structure requires.
Yeah.
Because we don't even build like that now. I don't even know if we can. We probably can, but we don't.
We don't, right.
Well, I mean, some things, as we discussed in last week's episode with Matthew LaCroix, is these ancient structures. Like, we don't have the technology to move 100,000-ton blocks. We don't even have the machinery. So how the fuck were they doing it? What did they know that we don't? And we're supposedly the most advanced civilization? Bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, there's, maybe in some capacity, but not others.
And what is the sky, and what is the earth, and what are the stars, and what is the sun? I mean, everything that we know that we're taught in school, they don't teach us that this is a theory.
Right.
This is the best theory that we have. This is the best theory that
This
we've
is the
got.
one we're running with.
This is the one we're running with. There's a lot of different options here, but you're being taught the one that we agree on most.
Yeah, that's mainstream.
We're not taught that. We're taught this is a fact.
It's true.
And anybody that says anything other than this is lying. And it's through education, and it's through religion, and it's through all these different mediums where there are ultimately power structures.
And dollar bills.
You know?
A lot of dollar bills.
But in the woods, in nature, it's God. It's only what exists. It's what's real. All that stuff isn't even real. Maybe it is. I mean, what is it?
Yeah.
We don't even know what it is. But to your point, in nature, man, That's 100% truth. There's no lies out there.
And what you're talking about is symbiosis, right? So when you were talking about psilocybin a minute ago, it's the reason why therapy, psilocybin, some of those other things work, but there's also work to go in after because you got to carry that forward, right?
Yes.
Well, it's a symbiotic relationship, and symbiosis simply means everything's connected.
Yes.
There's nothing unconnected. So we look at the sun, we go, that's the sun, but the sun is actually me and I'm actually it. We look at the sky, we go, that's the sky, but it's actually all part of what we are.
That's right.
So when we interweave ourselves into nature and we leave our cell phone in the truck, that's funny. I take guys out on a trip. That's the first thing we know. Are we going to have service? Like, no, you're not going to have service by design, right? But when we do that, we start going, wait a minute, man, I'm pretty small in the grand scheme of things.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. It's funny you said so. Yeah, I just pictured when you said that, are we going to have service? You take their cell phone and bash it with a hammer. like right there. Like if you had to depict that in a movie or something, that's exactly what your character would do.
Or a commercial, you know?
Yeah, hand me your cell phone. Let me switch to analog and then just bash it into a million pieces and hand it back to him.
You could have like a Hillary Clinton mask on.
I'm just kidding. You know what? It's funny you say that because I got the opportunity and I guess you could say I had some technology with me, but I had the opportunity to go on this extreme adventure where I met 6-7 dudes in Juneau, Alaska. Mm-hmm. We suited up and we hopped on these modified jet skis and we went from Juneau, Alaska, 550 miles to Prince Rupert, British Columbia in 5 days. Now we poured it every day and we stayed at a hotel, but being on that jet ski that close, I mean, you can't get closer to the water than that jet ski.
That's right.
And traveling, I mean, we had humpback whales just coming up all around us. I mean, killer whales. I mean, they could take us out in any second. I'm almost idling, trying not to be on the back of one of these humpback whales, going through these ice fields into the LeConte Glacier. And just, I mean, it was as close to God as I've ever, like spiritually, I've ever felt in my life. I mean, granted, we did have some technology. We had the ability to, had an engine that take us, but still, I mean, being amongst those mountains and you're on the water. I mean, you are subject. I mean, the jet ski might provide you the ability to go faster, but you still could be taken out at any moment. It's,
Man, listen, you take a guy out to Collegiate Peaks Wilderness area, you put his pack on his back, you hike him in Colorado, 5 or 6 miles, you're sitting by a glacier lake, you're looking up at 13-foot peaks, they got a little bit of snow on top of them, the high meadows are green, and all of a sudden you hear a bull elk bugle from about 200 yards off. If that does not bring chills and tears to somebody's face, they're just not alive. It's just this immersed ability to be. I mean, when we came through
Is that threatening? I'm sorry for my ignorance.
No,
it's just amazing.
Or is that in a beautiful sound?
It's just all of a sudden you're just like,
what is that, man? It sounds like something from another planet.
Yeah. Sounds like a fucking dinosaur. Like that.
Kind of.
Like,
yeah.
It's just a real moment. You know what I mean? You're just
I don't know if should I be scared?
Yeah. You're a little scared. You're a little excited. You feel like a kid again.
Man,
life looks brand new. With that, life's brand new.
Yeah.
Right out of the package.
Really?
You know what I mean?
It sounds amazing.
Everything's brand new. You love your wife more. You love your house more. You love your kids
in that
more.
Instant.
You love your problems more.
We
all in that same moment.
We walked up on a elk carcass a few years ago, and I had 2 guys with me, and we walked into the woods, and I'm looking at this thing laying on his side, and I could see the antlers sticking up on one side. I'm like, that elk is either bedded down or he's dead. So I pull up my binoculars, I look, and he's been disemboweled. I'm like, oh, he's dead. And so we walk in, and I turn, I look at the guys who were with me. I said, watch out for bears, boys. I no more got it out of my mouth, and they started just coming down out of the trees, and there was bear shit everywhere with blueberries in it. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. And I try and look, and my buddy is already gone, and he's the one with the gun. He's just running. Franklin, if you're listening to this,
you're seeing bears come down.
Oh, yeah, they're in the trees, man. They're coming down.
And he's the guy with the gun?
He's the guy with the gun. They just left me in there, which bears don't really bother me, hardly at all. But I just remember that moment of going, I am so tiny, man. Like I am. I walked up on a mama moose and her calf last year.
Right.
And all I had in my hand was a bugle, which is kind of like a wiffle ball bat. And my buddies are behind me, and I just keep walking toward them like, what are you doing? I'm like, what? either she's got to move or we do. So I start beating this bugle tube on my leg and she walks off. But those moments, man, you just realize, like, there's nothing alpha about me. She could have called over and just mutilated me. I can't run from her. I can't do anything. She just killed me. But at the same time, I want to be close to that.
That's right.
I don't want to run from that. I want to be up on that, man.
So if you decided to run, would it have probably chased you?
An elk or a moose?
Yeah.
No, huh?
No, okay. No. But you stood your ground. You're like, you know what? I think I can get this thing to move.
Yeah, I mean, it really wasn't even any thought going into it. It's just like being captivated into that moment.
They're like, man, we're with Crocodile Dundee right now.
No, I'm not going to wrestle him.
I think have you seen that movie? He's Crocodile Dundee. Like, holy shit.
Bears, elk.
Yeah, that's right. Is he
Bugles.
Bear Grylls? Are we out here with Bear Grylls?
Yeah.
It's just a really cool thing.
It really is.
A thunderstorm in the spring. I said that in the writing. We just came back from a trip from Adventures in Recovery back in May. And we woke up one morning and it's just, I mean, guys, only as Georgia can do, thunder and lightning, and it struck right down the valley. And I'm up under the tarp doing yoga, just laughing, man. I'm like,
that.
Like, what am I going to do? I'm going to run?
Right.
Like, but in that moment, you just feel this power.
Oh, it's so cool.
You're like, what am I? What am I? I'm like a flea on a German Shepherd's back. I can be flicked off at any moment, and it just makes you so alive, man. It's that illusion of control that nature takes away from you.
There's no security of any
The
kind.
only control we have in our entire lives, brothers, is our choices. That's it. Other than that, we don't have any.
Until you can't make the choice anymore because it's taken away from you.
Yeah.
The
That's
ability
still a
to
choice.
do so.
That's still a choice, though, how you respond to it. You read a book by a guy named Abraham Heschel. He was, nope, that's not the right name. I'll think of it in a minute.
Danielle Steele?
No, he was in a Nazi concentration camp, and he talks about choosing to be happy, choosing to love his oppressors, choosing to not let that be what defined him was being, and he lived through it.
Victor
Frankl. Yeah, Man's
Victor
Search for
Frankl.
Meaning.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an awesome book.
He's an amazing guy.
Yeah.
So how often do you do these retreats, adventures? How often are you taking people out into the wilderness and into nature?
So we did 4 this spring. We did 2 for guys in recovery, 1 for dads who had lost teenage sons to death. And then we have 1 leaving for guys in recovery tomorrow morning, actually. They'll meet me at the trailhead and we're headed out. Then we'll take off the summer. We really don't do a whole lot over the summer because
It's too hot. Yeah. So, and how many people will be with you?
6.
6. Is that always the number typically you go for? 6?
If we get that many to sign up, sometimes we have people drop
and plug the website again.
recoveryadventures.org.
So, God, that whole thing with dads who lost their teenage, is it son or daughter?
Man, but listen, hey, we had a dad that went, and I won't call his name, but he knows who he is, and he'll listen to this. He was on the verge of divorce. He was already dividing assets. His son was killed in a UTV accident, flipped it over, killed him instantly, 16 years old, whole life in front of him. They came up on the scene expecting to see a helicopter hauling him out. Instead, they saw a sheet, and the mama wanted to see it, and so they pulled the sheet back, and so there's just all this trauma. So we go on a trip, and I put him in the cold water. And I still have a text message from him. He's like, it changed my life. So I came home and I want to work on my marriage now. I have a renewed, but we just worked on his nervous system, right? You don't get that kind of trauma that doesn't stick in your nervous system because your rational brain wants to make sense of it, and it can't because there's no sense to be made.
Right.
But when it can, it sends it to your nervous system, which then goes, and then it goes right back up your rational brain.
It fucked you up.
Yeah. And so, man, he's doing his practices. He's doing cold showers, which work just as well. For those of y'all listening, he does yoga, he does his breathing, and it's really transformed his life.
That's crazy.
It's amazing.
I mean, that's cold. I mean, cold water seems to be the answer.
It's big, man, because what it makes you do, I mean, there's a whole scientific aspect to it, which we discussed, but really what it makes you do is it puts you in a position where you're incredibly uncomfortable and you just have to remind yourself that you're okay and you have to stay still. Every part of you wants to get out of that water, but it shows you that you can decide whether to get out or not.
Yeah.
And then the cold itself has health benefits and benefits on your mind as well. But there's that decision point where you're deciding to stay in the water. It's your decision, 100%. And once you do, you realize that not only am I okay, I feel better.
I can do this.
As a result of this choice to stay.
Yeah,
it's crazy, man.
It's pretty amazing.
And it doesn't just have to be cold, extreme heat. That's why people get runner's high. You take off running, you're just concentrated on your breath, and you're enduring these hours of pounding the pavement. It all creates this same dynamic. It just kind of comes down to intention, right? If I'm intentionally doing something that makes me suffer, but then finding peace in and of myself during that suffering, then somehow, just like encountering bears or encountering a moose or rock climbing up the side of the wall, when I get in this position to where everything in me wants nothing more than to get out of there, but yet I go, no, I kind of love this. I kind of want to stay right here.
Right. Well, that's where life is in the discomfort. And that's where it's courage, like being scared, but just I'm doing it anyway, right? Like it's...
Well, it's interesting, though, that
something on the other side.
Evil things or bad things that are destructive, like addiction, have the same allure to them. It's just that the result is different, right? I mean, having that extra drink or watching that pornographic film or going and seeing that person that you shouldn't go and see, it has that same kind of allure of, like you're saying, kind of these situations, I want to get out of this situation. It's like, you shouldn't go do that. But something within you is like, nah, I'm going to go do it anyways. But it's, like you said, intention and result.
Yep.
Right? The result of that's going to not be good for you.
Yep.
So can you make the decision not to go? Whereas in this case, the result is likely going to be something beneficial to you, but it's hard. David Goggins talks a lot about this.
I love that guy.
Yeah.
He's a beast.
This is where he lives. He's made a decision to be as often as possible in a state of suffering because of how beneficial he feels that it is for his life.
Have you read any of his books?
I am pretty familiar with him. But I love everything about him, but he's just a little too hard on himself. We have to love ourselves, man. And when I go to get in that cold water, it's not because you son of a bitch get in that water, you piece of shit. I don't sit there and look at the ice tub and go, I don't want to go, but I'm going to. I just go get in because I love myself, right? And if I love myself, and that's where my intention starts, then I don't go see the person I just shouldn't be going to see. I don't shoot the heroin in my arm. I don't overindulge in alcohol because I'm going, no, I love myself. I don't eat the excessive sweet because I've found a way to love myself. Most addicts hate ourselves, and the church teaches us how to hate ourselves because they teach us we're born with original sin, which is bullshit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And bullshit is a theological term in my word. It's bullshit. We're not born pieces of shit. We're born perfect.
That's right.
Perfect essence of who God wants us to be. And that God that wants us to be, that is inside of every single person. If I had to even say, when somebody says, where is God? It's in you. It's in me. It's in everything. God's not another place in some, golden streets and pearly gates. God is in us.
He's in DMT. That's a fact.
Right? It's fascinating, man. That is fascinating. I mean, like, how do you feel? I guess there's probably not a better feeling than taking an ex-military guy or a dad. I mean, and the feedback you get. Does it change on a percentage basis? Does it change everyone's life? Is it like cut and dry, like your life's changed? But it takes work. It takes continued work.
I would say it, I was talking to...
That might be a kind of a vague, hard question to answer, but...
It's a great question, actually. I was talking to my yoga teacher about 2 weeks ago, and she said, she talks about your dharma. And I don't know if you guys know what dharma is, but dharma is your purpose in the yoga tradition.
Is that like an Indian? I thought I've heard that.
In Sanskrit. And so my dharma is to be a teacher. It has been. It's been my whole life. I just didn't know it. I was moving in that direction. And so I'm a teacher without attachment to the outcomes of other people's lives. So I teach without any expectation, right? So when I teach somebody, and whether it's, we're walking down the trail and I'm showing them, what long broadleaf plantain looks like, or a pip sissawa, or this is a sourwood tree, you can chew on the leaves, or, this is a chicken of the woods mushroom, or this is a chanterelle. Or if I'm teaching them how to do breath work, or if I'm putting them in cold water and explaining the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, I'm giving them information that has worked for me, and what they do with it, I have no control over. Most teachers want to control the outcomes. I do not. I just give it to them and they do. And what I have found is if you brought, I don't know how many people we've taken out in the woods. Let's say I've taken 50. And if you brought all 50 of them in here, you might find 2 that would say, yeah, my life wasn't really changed by that. The other 48, and we've got video of it all. They're like, I'll never be the same. We get 30-day surveys back from them. Same thing. And it's not me. It's just nature and the information.
Right. And you're just showing them. It's like, give a man a fish, you'll feed him for a day. And try try to teach him how to fish, and he'll be able to feed his family, and everybody else he comes into, counter with. Hey, once again, thanks for listening to the ManFUzed Podcast. Join the show by hitting us up at ManFUzed.com. Check out our ManFUzed merch. Or you can give us a call at 770-744-5227. We'll talk to you tomorrow.